There is a type of person who enters a place, and before anyone speaks, they already feel something. Nothing obvious has happened. No argument, no raised voice, no visible tension, and yet somehow, their mind catches details most people ignore. A smile that arrives half a second too late. A greeting that sounds polite but strangely empty. A pair of eyes that avoid contact for only a moment, but long enough to create questions. For some people, these details pass like air, but for others, every tiny signal lands heavily. Their mind does not simply register what is happening. It immediately begins building meaning around it. Why did that person suddenly change tone? Why did the room feel colder after that sentence? Why did someone pause before answering? And the difficult part is this. The moment does not end when the situation ends, because even after they leave, their mind keeps working. It returns to that silence, that expression, that unfinished sentence, again and again. One small interaction can become an entire mental replay before sleep. Many people call this sharp awareness intelligence. Some call it emotional sensitivity, but in reality, for many people, it often feels less like a gift and more like carrying a mind that never fully sits down. Because noticing deeply is not always peaceful. Sometimes it means your thoughts remain awake long after the world has already moved on. And the more you understand hidden layers, the harder it becomes to simply exist inside ordinary moments. Today we are going to understand the psychology of people who notice too much, feel too much, and often become tired in silence because of it. And most importantly, why this happens. First, where does this extreme awareness come from? Psychology usually sees two main roots behind this kind of personality. For some people, this sensitivity exists from the beginning. Their nervous system is naturally built to receive more information than average. They hear subtle tones more clearly. They react more strongly to atmosphere. They process emotional signals with unusual depth. Science often connects this to highly sensitive personality traits. It means the brain receives ordinary life in unusually high detail. The world for them is rarely neutral. A normal conversation can feel layered. A crowded room can feel mentally loud. Even small emotional shifts around them can feel impossible to ignore. But for many others, this awareness was not born as a gift. It was built as protection. And this changes everything. Sometimes awareness begins in environments where safety was uncertain. A child living in emotional unpredictability learns very early that survival depends on reading invisible signs. They learn to listen beyond words. They notice footsteps. They recognize the sound of a door opening. They know the difference between silence, that means peace, and silence that means danger is coming. Some children become experts at reading moods before they even understand what anxiety is. They know when to stay quiet. They know when to disappear. They know when a small expression on a parent's face means the whole evening is about to change. No one teaches this directly. The nervous system learns it by necessity. The brain stores one message: stay alert. Read everything early. Avoid emotional shock if possible. Over time, that alertness becomes automatic. Even years later, when life becomes safer, the mind continues scanning as if danger still lives nearby. And many adults who carry this habit blame themselves. Why do I overthink everything? Why can't I relax like other people? But often what they call weakness was once intelligence built for survival. It helped them before. The problem is that later, the same mechanism begins exhausting them. Sign 1. The mind never stops analyzing. This is usually the first thing people notice. Their body may be sitting still, but mentally, they are constantly processing. For many people, a simple message is just a message. For them, every message contains possible meanings. Imagine receiving a short text from your manager. "We need to talk later." That sentence is enough. Immediately the mind begins moving. Did I do something wrong? Why is the sentence so short? Why no emoji today? Why later and not now? Nothing has happened yet. But tension already starts. And this does not only happen with text. It happens in conversations. Someone compliments them, but pauses first. That pause becomes important. Someone laughs but looks away too quickly. That detail stays. Someone says, "I'm fine," but the tone sounds slightly different. And suddenly their attention is no longer on the words. It is on what exists underneath. The brain keeps building interpretations. While talking, part of them is present. Another part is silently observing everything. Comparing tones, checking reactions, reading pauses. At the end of the day, their body may have done little, but mentally they feel like they ran for hours. Because hidden thinking consumes enormous energy, Sign 2, they monitor themselves constantly. The attention does not only move outward. Eventually, it turns inward too. And this becomes exhausting in another way. They do not simply feel emotions. They observe themselves feeling emotions. A sadness appears. But instead of allowing it, the mind immediately asks, "Why am I sad? Should I feel this? Does this make sense? What is wrong with me today?" A simple emotion becomes an investigation. Even joy is interrupted. They laugh, and seconds later wonder, "Did that sound natural? Was I too loud? Did I look strange?" It is like living with an internal camera that never stops recording your own behavior. Even while speaking, they are partially watching themselves speak. Even while resting, they are evaluating whether they are resting correctly. This creates distance. They remain intelligent but lose spontaneity. They are present physically, but mentally standing beside themselves. And after enough years, this constant self-observation can quietly remove natural ease from life. Sign 3, relationships become harder to experience innocently. Awareness changes relationships deeply. Because once someone becomes highly observant, they stop hearing words only on the surface. They notice intention. And sometimes that makes trust complicated. A kind gesture appears. Instead of simply receiving it, the mind asks, "Why now?" A compliment arrives. Part of them wonders, "What does this person want?" Someone apologizes, but they hear hesitation hidden inside the apology. They notice what others often miss. Sometimes kindness has conditions. Sometimes confidence hides insecurity. Sometimes affection arrives mixed with fear. This does not mean they become cynical. It means they begin seeing layers. And once layers become visible, simple interactions no longer feel simple. A promise sounds fragile. A smile feels interpretable. An invitation can trigger questions. That creates loneliness few people understand, because they are surrounded by others, yet often feel like they are seeing life through a different depth. And sometimes the hardest part is this: they wish they could stop reading so much, but the mind continues automatically. Sign 4, empathy becomes emotionally heavy. These people usually feel deeply affected by atmosphere. They enter a room and immediately sense tension. Nobody says anything, yet they already know something is wrong. A friend says it's okay, but they feel pain beneath the sentence. A stranger nearby carries nervous energy, and somehow their own body begins reacting too. This is why many overly aware people become emotional absorbers. They do not just understand pain, they carry traces of it. Someone tells them a sad story, and hours later they still feel heavy. A friend cries for 10 minutes, and the emotional weight remains inside them for days. This often makes them good listeners. People trust them. People feel understood around them, because they notice what others overlook. But the hidden cost is rarely visible. They often become the emotional container for everyone nearby. They calm others. They soften conversations. They choose words carefully. Yet when the day ends, very few ask how they feel. And because they are used to understanding others, they often forget that they too need emotional space. Sign 5, awareness begins affecting the body. Eventually, constant awareness reaches the body. And this is where anxiety often appears. A heartbeat becomes noticeable. Breathing changes slightly. A small physical sensation appears. For many people, that would pass unnoticed. For them, the brain immediately pays attention. Why is my heart beating faster? Why do I feel warm? Why this tension in my chest? Then the mind interprets. Maybe something is wrong. That thought creates more stress. The body reacts stronger. And now the sensation grows. A loop begins. A harmless body signal becomes a mental warning. This is why many highly aware people struggle with unexplained tension. Nothing serious is happening, yet the nervous system behaves as if danger is near. Because awareness without boundaries often turns ordinary sensations into constant alerts. When awareness becomes a form of control, at some point the mind begins believing, if I predict enough, I will suffer less. So it starts rehearsing future pain. What if they leave? What if this fails? What if tomorrow changes everything? The mind builds possible futures constantly, not because they enjoy worrying, but because preparation feels safer than surprise. This creates mental exhaustion. They are not living one day. They are mentally living 10 versions of tomorrow. And in trying to protect themselves, they slowly lose the ability to fully enter today. So how do deeply aware people become lighter? The answer is not becoming less intelligent. It is learning what deserves attention and what does not deserve emotional ownership. The first lesson: not every silence means rejection. Sometimes people are simply tired. The second lesson: not every emotion requires explanation. Sometimes sadness is only sadness. It does not need a full diagnosis. The third lesson: not every truth must become your responsibility. You may notice someone's insecurity. That does not mean you must fix it. You may understand hidden tension. That does not mean you must carry it. When boundaries appear, awareness becomes softer. Still deep, but no longer sharp enough to wound constantly. And slowly life changes. They still notice details, but they stop turning every detail into burden. They still understand people deeply, but they stop drowning inside every signal. And that is where maturity begins. Not in seeing less, but in learning that clarity is useful only when it comes with peace. Because true wisdom is not reading every hidden layer. True wisdom is knowing which layers deserve your heart, and which ones can simply pass. If you recognize yourself in this, you are not strange. You are not weak. You simply learn to see deeply. Now the real task is learning how to see deeply without losing your own calm in the process. And that changes everything.